Welcome to ACTV Newsmakers. The Addison Knights of Columbus Council sponsored their 8th annual Patriotism dinner here at the Medina Shrine Center. The keynote speaker was Addison Police Officer Dave Olajars, a Bronze Star Medal recipient of the United States Air Force. Coming up, we will show you highlights of Officer Olajars' remarks to those assembled for the Knights of Columbus Patriotism Dinner here at the Medina Shrine Center.
Dave Olajars began his career with us in 2017, but his service goes far beyond and started long before Addison PD. Dave enlisted in the United States Air Force in 1996, has served over 23 years in the Civil Engineer Squadron. He rose up through the ranks, holding positions as Airman, Senior Airman, Staff Sergeant, Master Sergeant, Senior Master Sergeant, and most recently retired as Chief Master Sergeant. In 2007, Dave entered law enforcement and began serving with the Lansing Police Department for 10 years before joining Addison PD. Since joining Addison, Dave became a peer support member. What that means is Dave goes around helping other cops. Dave's experience, if he's kind enough to share some of it with you, will quickly make you realize why. Because of Dave's life experience, caring nature, leadership, Dave took over our peer support program and is now running it. Dave wasn't content with that. Dave also signed up and now became a county-wide peer support member as part of a task force. So any agency in need of peer support, officers needing assistance, Dave's going to go out and talk to them. Dave has received the Air Force Achievement Medal, Air Force Commendation Medal, Air Force Meritorious Service Medal, and received the Bronze Star Medal. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure tonight to introduce you to an incredible man, Chief Master Sergeant, and this year's Knights of Columbus Patriotism Dinner Honorary Addison Police Officer, David Olajars.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Please take your seats. Good evening. Thank you, Chief, once again for the heartfelt introduction. I truly appreciate it. Very honored to be here in front of you tonight. I want to say thank you to Mayor Veenstra, Deputy Mayor Tom Hundley, the Board of Trustees for your support and attendance to the event. Thank you to Mike Bruntz. Thank you to Mike Bruntz and your team for the hard work and everything that went into going on to putting in this event. Once again, thank you, Chief Selvik. Thank you to all my colleagues as well from work for your continued support and dedication to my military career. Thank you to the residents of the Village of Addison. Without you, none of this could be possible. It's an honor and a privilege to serve and protect your beloved village. Thank you to all in attendance tonight. And lastly, thank you to my mother, Jerry, and my children, Ava and Ellie. They're all in attendance tonight. Thank you for your love and support for all these years. My accomplishments over the years will be nothing without you. When Chief Selvik and Mr. Bruntz approached me about this opportunity, I was very humbled, very excited. I figured they must have seen the newspaper of my retirement and my recent achievement, but I was thankful that they didn't know everything about my military career. I got bit by an alligator in a training event one time, for Pete's sake. That wasn't in the newspaper, fortunately. But I figured, what's the catch? You know, it sounds really good. I'll be up here, get an honor, get a nice meal. I'm like, you guys want me to speak in front of everyone, don't you? So I did a little research on public speaking. A little known fact in a recent study that public speaking is the #1 fear amongst Americans. Number 2 is death. So if you're at a funeral, most people would prefer to be in the casket than up there giving the eulogy. Pause for laughter. Oh, I wasn't supposed to read that part. Please forgive me. And of course I said yes, or they said yes. You got to make a speech. So I asked them what they would like to hear. And they mentioned just simply events leading up to me being a police officer and my military experience. So here's my story. I'll keep it short and sweet. Growing up, I went to a Catholic school. I got very good grades. I was an altar boy and a Cub Scout. On paper, I looked great. But I definitely loved to cause a lot of trouble as a youth. You can ask my mom, she's right there. You would have thought that I loved school so much, being the amount of time that I spent in detention. And when I got to high school, it was just the same. I used to like to cause a scene and make people laugh. It got me in so much trouble. But what I found out in high school is they have this thing called Saturday detention. So after spending one too many Saturdays walking around the football field picking up cigarette butts, or inside the library writing an essay like they did in the Breakfast Club movie, I decided it was time to make a change. I noticed that my brother, he's my older brother, and he was never getting yelled at or screamed at or in detention. So I decided to emulate him. And when he graduated high school, he joined the military. So I thought that would be a good start for me. And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. I remember shipping off to basic training. My mother and my grandfather drove me to the airport. I was 17 years old, 6'3", and about 150 pounds. I could run a 6-minute mile. 28 years later, I've nearly doubled in size and doubled my mile time. Those are both bad, you can laugh. After basic training, I started my career as a civil engineer, working in water purification, plumbing, and fuel systems. My whole career was as a reservist. So after basic training and technical school, I went back home where I trained monthly, went to college, and had a yearly deployed field training in a remote location. Towards the end of my first enlistment, I had a short deployment to the Middle East immediately following September 11th. I was stationed at a fairly safe area, El Dhafra Air Base in UAE. We were doing base expansion projects. Tensions were still high at the time, but it was nevertheless a good place to be. My squadron's mission was completed without incident. A year later, I completed my first enlistment, and after my enlistment, I decided to get out of the military. At that time, I was working in the civilian world as an account manager for CDW. I then moved on to another management position. Ultimately, I found that the business world was not necessarily my calling. I once again followed in my brother's footsteps and became a police officer. As Chief stated earlier, I started with the Lansing Police Department, where I worked as a patrol officer, crime scene investigator, and later became a detective. After a few years, I pursued a career with the beautiful village of Addison, and I haven't looked back. I retained my status as a juvenile officer and taken over the peer support group as well. I plan to grow the peer support group and take on some new responsibilities in the future as well. I enjoy working with Addison and can see the village is run with a lot of care for its employees and especially its citizens. But during my time in the civilian world, I missed serving the country so much that I re-enlisted back in 2005. Since then, I became a supervisor in my career field, supervising about 10 personnel. I was later selected as the first sergeant, where I supervised about 120 personnel. After that, I moved on to the group command, where I supervised over 400 personnel. Shortly after group command, I was sent on a second deployment and returned to El Dhafra in UAE with the operations group as a first sergeant. For those who aren't aware, operations group is basically the pilots and the air crews. After that deployment, I returned back to the Civil Engineer Squadron as the heavy repair superintendent at the rank of Senior Master Sergeant. During my time as a Senior Master Sergeant, I led teams to aid with natural disaster recoveries. I led a team of approximately 100 people, mixed with soldiers and airmen, to the COVID-19 pandemic response, where we established and manned a medical care facility and transitioned to a mobile COVID testing center. I also led a team of 120 security force troops and augmentees to supplement the security at the 2021 presidential inauguration. I was later promoted to Chief Master Sergeant and led over 120 troops on several projects, such as building homes and repairing homes on a Native American reservation in Montana, building a camp for children with disabilities in Mississippi, and building new storage facilities on Yokota Air Base in Japan. My last mission was the Chief Enlisted Manager for the 443rd Expeditionary Squadron at Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq. I oversaw 3 different bases during my deployment: Al-Assad, Erbil Air Base, and Basra Air Base. I was able to travel amongst the 3 remote locations by means of helicopter and sometimes aircraft. I wanted to share some experiences with my last deployment to Iraq in 2022. Although the area had severely cooled down since the beginning of the war, I knew I was still going into a high threat area. Our mission at the time was to advise, enable, and assist the Iraqi military to ideally turn back over full military operations to the base. It was once a stronghold held by the Iraqi army under the command of Saddam Hussein. You may remember reading about Al-Assad Air Base when it was attacked by an array of theater ballistic missiles from Syria back in 2020. It has since been the ongoing target of Iranian-aligned militia groups, to include drone attacks, rocket attacks, mortar attacks, and any combination thereof. The base was once furnished with beautiful buildings, recreation, and a full Olympic-sized swimming pool. The base had changed ownership between the U.S., coalition, and Iraq military, and is now in control of the Iraq military, with the U.S. holding a small footprint there. During the few times that I had been to the Iraqi side of the base for meetings with Iraqi leadership, I had noticed I was able to see the once flourishing base now had hundreds of abandoned buildings, garbage blowing about freely like tumbleweeds in the Old West, and an Olympic-sized swimming pool that was now filled with sand and dust. The 443rd Squadron was my assigned unit. It was the most unique squadron I've ever served in or even heard of. It's compiled of several flights to include security forces, civil engineers, communications, airfield management, aircraft transportation, and fire department personnel. I have only ever worked with civil engineers and had not experienced supervising any of the other flights. At the end of my first 10 days in country, the reality of the situation set in when the base received a drone attack from a localized militia group. The drone was able to make it into the base perimeter before our base defenses deemed it unfriendly and engaged the threat. I was working late that night, and I was in a hardened facility at the time, so I was fairly safe. As the attack happened, I could hear our weapons engaging the drone and an explosion to follow. The weapons on the base were a CRAM, which stands for Counter Rocket Artillery and Mortar, and also a Coyote missile system. The CRAM was amazing to watch. It's typically equipped with 62 caliber rounds and can shoot roughly around 5,000 rounds a minute. That's about 80 rounds per second. I was inside the facility, so I didn't see the weapons engage the drone, but I saw a video after the fact. It was amazing to see the CRAM engage the enemy. The CRAM struck the wing of the drone, slowing it down, but it was still in course to its target. After the drone was slown, the Coyote missile system engaged the drone and blew it out of the sky. After we had heard that first explosion, there was a secondary explosion that occurred a short time after, which turned out to be the payload that the drone was carrying. The blast from the explosives was strong enough to shake the building that I was in, and the pressure nearly blew my door in. Luckily, the drone did not reach its target and did not occur any casualties at that time. I remember wanting to call my family that night and let them know that I was okay, but I didn't tell them because I didn't want to worry them. I knew it was unlikely that a thwarted attack would be newsworthy, so they wouldn't have a need to reach out and see if I was okay too. So I guess that made me feel good. I waited until after the deployment when I got home to tell them about the attacks that we endured. Another occurrence was on Memorial Day of 2022. There was another late night attack from the localized militia group. This time it was a combination of rockets and drones, where the base was struck several times. It woke me up and I ran to one of the nearby bunkers for safety. As soon as there was a pause in the attack, the commander and I ran out of the bunker to our work center to gather information from the attack. It was discovered that one of the rockets had hit the airfield, which was our primary responsibility and our biggest defense. But it was not determined where it had been hit. I went over to speak with the airfield management team to help locate the point of impact. While airfield management was aiding with the location, they received notification from the air traffic control tower, which had limited communications during the attack, that 2 Black Hawk helicopters were requesting permission to land. I recommended that they divert to Baghdad due to the ongoing attack and unknown damage to the airfield. It was determined that they did not have enough fuel to last even 10 more minutes in the air. I then rushed the information over to the commander and senior airfield authority, and we instructed them that they must land on our airfield with caution. I relayed the message to the tower, who in turn communicated it to the pilots of the Black Hawk helicopters. I then notified the Base Defense Operations Center of the incoming friendly helicopters to deconflict any potential friendly fire. It would have been a tragic situation to launch an assault on our own troops, with our communications temporarily disrupted. Immediately after that, I put the fire department crash rescue team on alert of the situation and advised them to be ready for an emergency landing. The Black Hawks were able to avoid the damaged airfield and had a safe landing without incident. A short time later, we determined where the point of impact was, and I assembled our civil engineer heavy equipment team to assess the damage and make necessary repairs. Within a few short hours, the civil engineer team had the damages repaired and fully operational. It was inspiring to see the 443rd Expeditionary Squadron come together and handle a dangerous situation flawlessly. The training kicked in, and these brave airmen and soldiers did an amazing job when it mattered most. It was largely due to handling this situation and many other situations like this that I was awarded a Bronze Star for meritorious service. It had been over a year since any Air Force members had received a Bronze Star in the theater. I was truly honored to be considered and approve of the decoration. In closing, I'm honored to have served our great country for over 24 years. It's been one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life. I want to say thank you to all that have served, past and present, to our missing members at the table there, and especially thank you to those who support the military and their families. Thank you all for listening to my story. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and I'll be at the table to welcome any questions if you have any. I'll be here as long. My little daughter's got to go to a sleepover tonight, so she may be nagging at me later on. But please, thank you. I appreciate the honor. It's great. Thank you.
From the Knights of Columbus Patriotism Dinner at the Medina Shrine Center, I'm Don Weiss. Thank you for joining us on ACTV Newsmakers.